Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the community conversation for Teddington, Hampton Wick, Fulwell and Hampton Hill. This event is part of the Council's Community Engagement Programme. It's good to welcome so many local people. Thank you for giving of your time. My name is John Latham, and I am the lay preacher linked with the United Reformed Church on Hampton Hill High Street, where we are trying to play our part in building our community. You may know the church, not least for the modern stained glass window seen best from Bushy Park in the evenings. But this event is one of several conversations across the borough, focusing tonight on the future of our high streets. By way of brief introduction, there's some details to let you know about and a couple of procedural items to enable a full and open discussion. Firstly, and importantly, this is an entirely non-political event, solely focusing on the future of our high streets. Please may I ask you to respect that. By joining this event, you've been asked to agree to the event etiquette and guidance sent out to you at registration. In essence, we will treat each other with kindness and respect. We will hear from a specialist speaker and from one local councillor for each ward, as well as council officers, before making use of breakout rooms to discuss ideas in smaller groups. Each small group will be supported by a council officer, and after this we will have the opportunity to put questions to our local ward councillors on important issues. I hope you've seen the agenda with the details of how to log in, but just in case, and in a moment we'll hear from the three local councillors, all together taking up just 10 minutes. Our main speaker is Mr. Paul Clement, who works with business improvement districts, destination management organisations and local partnerships to design and deliver place-focused strategies. From 7 till 7:35 we'll be in our breakout rooms and later hear feedback from Mr. Paul Clement. From 7:40 to 8 we'll have our community conversation discussion, where you will be asked to offer your questions on any subject to our ward councillors. We will conclude promptly, I promise you, at 8 o'clock. On behalf of you all, may I thank Mr. Clement for joining us and leading our thinking, and thank you too for our ward councillors for being with us. A sincere thank you too to the council officials who've organised this event and who are with us in large numbers, giving of their time to support us. To conclude, there are some practicalities to share. Please may I emphasise that this event is being recorded and will be published after the event on the council website. All of us attending will be muted, other than panel members. If you wish to speak, please write the word question and then the subject in the chat room. Please don't write the full question. So, for example, you would write the word question on graffiti. When I say your name, a member of the event team will unmute you. And if you do speak, it would be good if you could turn your camera on, please. If during the conversation you have a point or a question about a similar aspect of the theme, for example, graffiti, please use the hand tool to signal to me that you would like to add something. This should help us group the questions. And now then, without further ado, we have our 10 minutes together, and it is my pleasure to invite the councillors from the different wards to speak to us. And I understand that Councillor Brown will be telling us, Councillor Ellengorn will be telling us something of the work going on in Teddington.
Thank you very much, John. Well, I'll try and stick to 3 minutes. There's quite a lot to say. Obviously, you can follow it up in question times at the end. We have a number of consultations either happening or about to happen. The one that's already happening is for enhanced cycle arrangements in Strawberry Vale. It's quite an ambitious scheme. It affects Teddington Ward and South Twickenham Ward, and that is current at the moment. And there'll probably be a range of views about this, but the intention of it is part of our active travel strategy to make what's already quite a well-used cycle route even better. There, very soon, the big second stage consultation on controlled parking zones will take place. This again is mainly Teddington, but also does affect Fulwell ward. People have given their general views as to which ward should be in and which shouldn't, and this is primarily fine-tuning, envisaging, dividing the area into 4 zones, and we are awaiting your responses with anticipation. Ellery Hall has already been subject to 2 consultations, and we've had dialogue with residents who live nearby. The next and final consultation stage is when the planning application is put in, which will be very soon. Bridges, we've got 3 things going on in Bridges. At last, we have a date for when the lifts will be installed at Teddington Station, June 2022. And I'm hoping I'll still be alive then, but it has been a long wait, and compulsory purchase or potential compulsory purchase has been involved. South of the main footbridge, the southern footbridge, repairs there are imminent. The suspension bridge over the river, we put a lot of money available for quite major repairs. It is now almost the summer holidays, so the likelihood this will take place next summer holidays. Other than that, perhaps just mention the stables, as we know, have sadly moved out, but they regard it as a temporary move, and there still is a hope that they'll be able to come back into Park Lane. Meanwhile, we are working on designating the building as a building of townscape merit to enhance its protection. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gordon. Could I now ask Councillor Brown if he could tell us something of the work in Hampton Wick, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll start by just quickly welcoming Petra Fleming to the Hampton Wick Councillor team. Petra was elected in the by-election in May. Just moving on to Udney Park. So Udney Park, people may be aware that Quantum announced they were intending to sell Udney Park following the failure of their planning application, and they've appointed Savills to market it. But actually only a qualified community bidder can, in fact, buy that before the 16th of August because it's an asset of community value. So there is an organisation, the Udney Park Community Fields Foundation, has been set up by Jonathan Dunn, local businessman and chair of Thamesians Rugby Club. That potential bid has the support of various local councillors, our MP and sports clubs in the area. Your local councillors are in touch with all the local parties on this. We have asked officers to put Savills straight on their marketing, which is quite misleading. We're supportive of the community bid, and we're also looking at a possibility of a building of townscape merit designation for the pavilion. Staying with sport, Teddington Hockey Club have submitted a planning application for both new and replacement floodlights on the Teddington school site on the Astro pitches. They've also requested an extension of the playing hours to 9:30 in the evening. So planning officers will be going through the representations on that one. Quick mention about the works at Bullen Hall, and I would like to thank the Hampton Wick Association team for all their patience with the project, which has seen rather slow progress in the contractor, but we are looking forward before too long to a much improved hall facility with cheaper and more affordable hire rates, a reopened library before too long, and hopefully that'll also be able to open during lunchtime hours. I'd also like to thank Jane Turner, who is from the Friends of Hampton Wick Station, and she's doing sterling work, trying to push both Network Rail and South West Rail to complete the works on Hampton Wick Station, which have been outstanding for some time now, and hopefully also make other improvements while they're finishing those refurbishments. Local councillors and the MP are all supporting, pushing those organisations, and I attended quite a positive on-site meeting with Jane yesterday. A couple of pieces of local housing news, because affordable housing is a priority for the administration. There are going to be 7 new affordable homes built on the Bucklands Road site by RHP. And the good news is they're 3 and 4 bedroom houses, which are the big ones that we're really short of. And in case people weren't aware, Sheldon House, which is the big block on the corner of Cromwell and Fairfax roads, is actually scheduled to be demolished in due course by RHP. It's too expensive to maintain, too poorly built, and a much improved affordable housing replacement offer will be put in place in due course there, which will be great. Finally, on the roads, so the School Street outside St John's School is now fully operational and is issuing fines during school drop-off and pick-up time, so watch out for that. Local councillors are very closely watching the impact of the scheme in terms of the benefits, but also the effects on local residents. And it'll run through to the end of the summer term, and there'll be an assessment process in the autumn for whether it should continue or not. And a relatively small cycle scheme compared to the Strawberry Vale one, but there's a cycle contraflow being consulted on Park Road, which will allow bikes to travel down Park Road towards the High Street. And local councillors are supportive of that scheme. And finally, I know Petra has been out and talking to a number of our, Hampton Wick traders on the High Street. So just a quick welcome to any of our local Hampton Wick traders, and hope to have a chat with them in the meeting rooms.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very clear. Now, could I ask Councillor Cardy if he could tell us something about Fulwell and Hampton Hill, please?
You're muted, Jonathan.
Yeah, Councillor Cardy, we haven't been able to hear you. Perhaps
I think Councillor Saunders is.
Oh, Councillor Saunders is here, is she?
Yes.
Yes, I thought I was going to, but it doesn't matter. I'll go ahead if that's okay. And then Jonathan and Matthew might want to add, but we have a quick chat. The things that have been happening really, we've had, obviously we're part of this large CPZ consultation that Martin referred to. So that covers a chunk of Fulwell and Hampton Hill ward as well. There were 2 planning applications. I'm trying to think, it's all such a long time ago, but 2 planning applications before Christmas. One which is likely, which did get approved at Strathmore Road for affordable housing near to Stanley School. So we're waiting to hear really when that's going to happen. And the other planning application, St Clair's, was refused. We have got some issues around one of our local relatively small industrial sites that we're trying to address. There was a air quality public meeting, virtual, which Siobhan very kindly supported last, I think it was May now actually, which was kind of led by Hampton Hill Association, but lots of support from the council side. Obviously, it's very fitting for this evening's theme regarding the High Street, because actually well over 2 years ago, in fact, I think it was pre-COVID, we started up a small group with Georgia, our town centre manager, and Hampton Hill Association and some residents to start looking at that time, it was about the environmental impacts of Hampton Hill High Street and how we might improve things like waste, litter, pollution, plastic use, that kind of thing. And then COVID came along and everything was sort of suspended. And then we kind of carried on in fits and starts, meeting virtually. And we've now really run with that and taken on board much more the how to re-stimulate the high street and footfall, with lots of ideas of how that might happen. And we had a really positive meeting with Lorinda, who's on the call, I can see, only last week. And we came away feeling very positive about some of the ideas we were talking about. But obviously this evening is also about that, and I'm sure we all are very keen to hear what other people might throw into the mix. The other thing that we've kind of been behind, it's not actually in the ward, but will be after May next year. And it's on our border is the David Lloyd's site, which is Metropolitan Open Land. So we've been working with 1 or 2 residents to look at conservation and habitat conservation as well on that site, with a view to setting up a friends group. And I know Art is probably here this evening, who's been basically been leading on that. And that is a really exciting project, we hope, which David Lloyd is supporting, as well as our ecology officer at the council. I think that's just about it, I think. I don't know if Jonathan and Matthew have got anything.
I think, if I may, we will press on. I think it was a lovely introduction to the main topic of our discussion, the exciting ideas about rejuvenating and focusing on our high streets. So may I now call on Mr. Paul Clement and thank him again for joining us, and ask him if he could lead us in the next stage of our meeting to explore the future of our high streets. Thank you, Mr. Clement.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you very much, councillors. This is the third session that I've done, and I'm taken aback by how much is going on in your localities. Councillor Saunders, thank you very much for you being my warm-up act of the importance of town centres. I'm exceptionally grateful. So my role, I mean, I've been I've been talked about as a keynote speaker, but actually I'm going to really restrict it into a couple of 3 minutes, because all I want to do is give you the context and then give you as much time as possible to discuss what is happening and what is going to happen on your high streets. So what have we learned in the last 15 months? Well, clearly, it goes without saying, the pandemic has been dreadful, it's been tragic, it's been hugely damaging, it has affected people's lives and their livelihoods, but we're now beginning to emerge out of it, we hope, and what we are specifically looking at is what effect has it had on our high street. So the first thing I'd like to say is, the changes that is happening on your high street right now was happening before COVID. Let's all not think that COVID has caused the issues and that when COVID lifts, the issues will simply go away. What is happening on every single high street in the UK is deeply, deeply structural. Retailers are finding themselves in a position where it is difficult to trade out of bricks and mortar, and high levels of cost mean that particularly independent businesses struggle to actually get access to the high street. But what have we learned positively out of the last year? Well, actually, I think there's some lessons we can take to the future of our high streets. What we have done is connected in different ways I'll give you, but connected far more locally. And we value the local so much more. Too many of us a year ago didn't even know who our neighbour was. But then we found ourselves on a Thursday evening clapping the NHS together with them and enjoying their company. So we value community. We want to support the local. We're likely to travel less in the future, and that means we will be spending more time locally. So there is some positive outcomes. So what's the future of retail? Well, the honest answer is retail is not going to be the solution for the majority of the UK's high streets. It has ended up owning or occupying a disproportionate amount of floor space. And the reality now is a lot of retailers can't trade effectively in bricks and mortar. That might be about the cost of occupation. It might be the fact that we're all buying a bit more online. It might be that when we choose to do bigger shops, we go elsewhere and we go out of town, or it could be a combination of all sorts of things. So we need to think beyond a normal economic cycle where retail will just pick up the vacancies and off we go and we can all forget what's happened. The other aspect that is beginning to really now focus people's minds is how are we all going to work? The likelihood, I think, is that we won't all be working from home for years to come. In fact, personally, I pray that's not the case, but we probably won't be sitting back in the office 5 days a week as we were before. A more hybrid pattern is likely to emerge. So what that means is a greater proportion of people's working time each week will be spent in their home locality. And therefore, the high streets have got to offer them different things than they offered them before when they were perhaps commuting and working elsewhere. What is really emerging now is competition for identity. Homogenisation of high streets is a thing of the past. Your high street needs to work out what it is good at, what it's going to be great at, and really do it well and differentiate itself from the high street down the road, because it has to find its own future purpose. So differentiation and specialism is going to be very important. Residential trends are continuing. One of the slightly ironic things through COVID is that even though we all thought everybody would just flee to the rural suburbs and never approach any main centre again, the residential trends are the opposite. People still want to live in towns and in cities. They still want to live where the commercial activity is. They want to live close to the centre. And then the final thing that I say here is it's very easy in these community conversations to come up with a long shopping list and then look at your local authority and say, there you go, go and solve it. And the reality is it's gone beyond local authorities being able to solve every problem. They're simply not going to be able to do it. In fact, in a really easy sense, they don't own all the properties in your high street, so they can't solve all the problems. But what local authorities can do is they can demonstrate leadership. They can bring people together. They can try and gain a consensus over what the future looks like. And then they convene discussions like this. And that's a very valuable role. But we need to understand this is a collective issue. This is not something that we can look at our local authority and say, solve it. Now, tonight, it fits into a long pattern of discussions. It started with a partnership conference in 2021. And again, just to give you some context, I want to remind those of you that weren't in attendance of the 5 themes that emerged from this. Now, just remember, we weren't necessarily talking about one location. We were talking about high streets generically. The first theme that emerged very strongly is our town centres and our high streets need to be created as destinations, places that people want to go to because they no longer need to go to them. Want has replaced need. Number 2, we need to really focus our high streets around people, not about business and transaction. The business and transaction that takes place should be as a result of what people want to find there. Number 3, a much more balanced footprint. Actually an opportunity not just to fill vacant shops with more shops, but to think really differently about how we use vacant units or areas of land. Number 4, be really creative was the message that came through. Don't think like the same old. Bring creative uses into our high streets, be creative about how we modify them. And then the elephant in the room came into the room. And that was about digitalisation. So let me give you a couple of stats on digitalisation. The first is that on planet Earth, more people own a mobile phone than own a toothbrush. The second is that most people who use a smartphone use it for a minimum of 3.5 hours every single day. So the mobile phone, the digital appliance, the tablet, we can't say people that shop on the internet stay at home. We need to find ways in which those devices come to life in our high streets and are part of our high streets and are an invitation in to our high streets. So in a second, I'm going to pose you the questions I'm going to want you to talk about when you go into the breakout rooms, but we need to all understand the importance of this evening, which is that it fits into the context of our local plan. And Grace is going to talk us through how that process is emerging. Grace.
Yes, thanks, Paul. I'm going to share my screen. Great, okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Grace, and I'm here from Richmond's planning policy team to give a bit of an overview of the local plan development process, what that means for your local area, and how that fits into some of the points that were just raised by Paul. So the planning policy team are the council department that produce the local plan, and we work with other council departments to inform the planning decisions and explore things like the impact of new developments. But we don't undertake this process internally. At several stages, we invite the community in to take part, as we know that you're very knowledgeable in your areas and have lots of great ideas. And although there are many things that are out of council control, as Paul just mentioned, we also do work with landlords and landowners to try and influence development, but factors like high land value or high demand for certain uses, such as housing, also do influence planning policy. So the local plan is a legal document, and it's produced by each local authority in England. And essentially it sets out some guidelines that lay out our vision and objectives for the borough. And a plan is usually produced once every 10 years and typically renewed once every 5 years. Although in Richmond, we decided that the next review should happen a bit sooner so we could better reflect very pressing issues such as the climate emergency, changes to central planning policy, and also to respond to the new local plan that was published recently, which also includes its very ambitious housing target. And the local plan does not always adopt policies that are popular or fall in line with individual interests, but it aims to kind of balance the needs of all users of society and users of places, so members of society. So for example, rather than dictate or operate specific jobs or services or community facilities, the local plan aims to create the conditions for those services and businesses to thrive. So the local plan does ensure that we're thinking long term, that we're placing developments in the most appropriate places, protecting land that needs to be protected, influencing how places look and feel, and also how we travel around. But it does not do things like cap property prices or reduce rents, or resist chain shops, control parking, or how often waste and recycling is collected. And I wanted to give an example of what some of these policies might look like in practice. So this is the 15 to 20 minute neighbourhood concept. And that is the idea that our places should be complete, compact and connected neighbourhoods where most of the things you need are within walking distance or a short cycle trip away. For many of us, the pandemic has really highlighted the benefits of living locally and being able to access the things you need without making long journeys or visiting busy local centres. As well as the 5 larger centres around Richmond, there are also around 30 local neighbourhood centres, and you can see Kew, which is pictured here. And these kind of smaller local centres and parades, which are really important for top-up shopping or having a coffee. It's kind of specialist shops, and they're really great for people who are less mobile, maybe don't have access to a car. And going forward, we want to make sure our centres continue to be successful, distinctive places that can adapt to changes in the retail sector and the way we shop, as well as help respond to new use class legislation. And we also know that each area is very different and it has its own challenges and opportunities. We also know that you know your local centres very well, and we're really keen to hear your thoughts on that to help us shape the local plan, which is why events like this are so important. And this is an overview timeline of the local plan development process. I'm not going to go into detail with this. You can see it's very long. This timeline covers a range of about 4 years, possibly 5. But what I wanted you to take from this is that it's a very long process and it builds up weight as we go through the journey. And as part of this process, the council also is commissioning a new set of research or local plan evidence to help inform the plan. This includes a review of the open land designations, an urban design study to help us understand where the borough's constraints and realistic capacity for growth are, as well as research that anticipates future need for housing, retail and leisure, and also to support businesses. So to summarise, we're setting out a long-term vision for Richmond that looks 15 years into the future and beyond. This will reflect the changes we've all experienced over the pandemic, but also look forward to supporting our high streets and local centres to deliver for the community. We want to build on our borough's strengths as a place with strong arts, culture and leisure and heritage facilities that are enhanced by the presence of the river. And we want to continue to work with our communities and local partners to make sure that this vision is developed with you. Thank you very much. I'll hand back over to Paul.
Thank you very much, Grace. So what we've learned there is that we're in the early stages of the development of this long-term plan, but we are in the crucial stage. So this is the ideas gathering. This is where you have your say. Yes, in the future, you'll be given more than ample chance to comment on the plan as it evolves in draft form. But if you want to get ideas and proposals in there, now is the time. Now, I'm going to set you the 3 questions I want you in groups to answer in just a moment. So pen and paper at the ready if you want to write them down. If not, assume somebody else in your group would have done so. But before I do that, we're just going to show you a quick video which will start to stimulate even more thoughts about your high streets.
I think with lockdown recently, there's more community feel to it. And I mean, for me, I was commuting, working until last year, so I didn't spend so much time locally. But now, yeah, you do get to know, being here all the time, you get to know people, and running the shop, getting to know lots of different people within the community, not just young parents.
it's a proper high street. It's diverse and it's not full of chains. And as such, you tend to meet proper people, people who actually own the businesses.
I feel like, to be honest, because I just moved here last year, I feel like it's not very young. Like, I don't think I could go out round here and like be around people my age. I think it's quite, it's not for young people.
There's just not enough parking, I think. Sometimes they have areas that are zoned for residents, and that pushes everybody into different places. So it could be troublesome for shoppers to find a place to park.
Carpooling. I think the council could do more for carpooling. We don't do it yet, but we will.
The pavements need improving quite a lot.
It's not just the high street, it's the whole Hampton Wick.
But what we do find, on again a more positive thing, is that the streets are kept pretty clean.
Speed limit's dropped to 20. I don't think everybody adheres to that, so I would like to see that enforced a bit more just to make it safer for everybody. But yeah, I mean, the stations there, they've got parking restrictions in place. I think it's pretty well managed, but it does feel a lot busier sometimes on the high street.
It just feels quite villagey, and you always see people you know. All the kind of services are great, the range of shops are brilliant, the kind of like, independent butchers. Yeah, we love it.
There's your tagline for the next 20 years. We just love it. But in there alone, look, there were some challenges, weren't there? One person saying not enough car parking, somebody else saying the cars need to be even slower than they are, somebody else saying the streets need to be made accessible. God, that's just one area we could go on with for the rest of the night if we wanted. But I want you to focus on 3 questions, okay? And you've only got 35 minutes to do this. So the first question is, we want to understand how you use your high street. How often do you go there? What do you go there for? What do you visit more frequently? What do you go to less frequently? How do you get there? Do you use the high street in the evening? And if you don't, why not? When do you visit and what do you visit for? That's question number 1. Question number 2, we'd like to know what you'd like to see on your high street that would improve it. Now, that could be anything. You might, for example, say, it's absolutely brilliant, I love it, nothing could be improved, nothing wrong with that. But you might want to see more green spaces, different kinds of shops, less shops, more shops, leisure, amenity, cycle lanes, more events, whatever. So what do you want to see? And then the third question, and this is where you just lie back and you think big, you blue sky think, is we want some ideas that would really transform your high streets, okay? Now that can be anything. You've clearly got to be realistic, but do think big. So my instruction to you all is this: don't get stuck in the problems. Don't try and look back on a golden era. Be realistic about where your high streets are at and contribute in a positive way to what their future will be. Work constructively and don't be afraid to think big. So you just need to sit there now, and we are going to send you off into a series of rooms. I'm going to jump between the rooms and try and capture some of the conversations. When you arrive, you will have 35 minutes. So because you've got 3 questions, roughly 10 minutes on each question, don't run out of time, and that gives you 5 minutes as a bit of leeway or a wrap up. Okay, so we're going to press some buttons, stay where you are, and you will end up in a group within about 10 seconds. So we've got everybody back. Right, okay. Well, look, the first thing is I managed to spend sort of 5-6 minutes question 1. What I can say is that there were some common themes between the groups that I managed to pick up, but obviously you were all talking about different high streets. So I'm not going to name the high streets. I'm just going to pull out some of the themes, but this is not an endless list. So on some of the high streets, too much traffic. The things that make us go there are the things that are different, not just the shops, but even the swimming pool. We really value food and drink in the evening. We'd love to see now more community events. We've found there's a real social feel on our high streets, and we need to harness that sometime. Somebody, and I wrote down the quote, "It is the focus of my everyday life." Whoever that was that said it in group 2, you need to go and read a book by a guy called Jan Gehl. He's an architect and he planned town centres based on people's everyday life. So you were spot on in my view there. More walking and cycling, cars are an issue, on-street parking is an issue. We'd love to see different shops, but it's for you to demand those shops. You know, they're not just going to rock up. You've got to tell retailers what you want. There isn't enough variety on some of the shops. A lady who uses Hampton Heath has now moved her haircut, I managed to learn. So she has her haircut locally, she has a haircut, grabs a coffee, and then if she wants to go and buy a house in the afternoon, there's loads of estate agents. You want shopping to be different, you want it to be special, you want it to be exciting, but more than anything, you want local retailers and local produce. And you will support local businesses. One lady was telling the group how she'd not had as much takeaway in years, and now she literally goes around the individual restaurants and gets a takeaway, I think one a night, I'm not sure. But people do use high streets more. More cycling, better access on paths, more markets, particular farmers markets. Why don't we get artists using vacant shops like they do in other locations? And let's stop people cycling on the footpaths, but let's make sure the roads are clear that they can cycle on. Shut me up. Yeah. Okay, get parking off the streets, bring the river into play where you can, and develop creative spaces. Put bike parking in, use studios, art classes, yoga, that will bring the community together. Don't put another bloody hairdresser in, is what one person said. She was getting rather irate at that point. Shop local, but you must have more fresh food. And let's use it for community space, more greening on our high streets, more art and leisure, more flexible working space. And then in one group, proof of my point about digital was, somebody was telling a story about how in Hampton Wick, there was a fantastic Italian food shop that had opened. It sounded great. I looked it up online. They can deliver to my house in Ipswich. I am a new customer. That's why you need digital on your high streets. So, John, back to you now for the question and answers. Listen, everybody, it's been an absolute pleasure. We will make sure everything you've said is collated, and it will now feed into plans, and you'll hear the results in due course. My work here is done. Back to John, your chair. Now I've managed to lose John on my
Sorry, we're just unmuting him, I think.
Oh, okay, you're unmuting, it's fine. So this is the moment.
I just wanted to say thank you to you, Paul, for stimulating us and getting us going, and certainly much of what you caught we shared in the group that I was able to join in with. Thank you very much for starting our thinking. Now is the time which I hope some of you have been looking forward to, where you may have questions or comments that you would like to make for officers or councillors to hear. And if you would like to do that, if I can remind you that if you use the chat sign and you put the word question in there and then a one-word topic, then we will be able, I hope, to take as many questions as we can in the next 15 minutes or so. So if you'd be kind enough to put your questions now, we can get started. Thank you. Well, while people are thinking, may I kick off then, rather than hold people up or put people too quickly on the spot? Would one of the officers or perhaps one of the councillors be able to talk a little bit about more studio space for artists and creative working in our high streets? Is that something that might happen, please?
I was mentioning to my focus group that we've got a great start in Hampton Wick. One of the empty shops has been taken up by a brilliant artist. Do pop down there, Rupture Exhibit, she's called it. She's a very talented artist, and she's sharing the space with lots of other artists who get to do an exhibition for a week. She's also hosting events in there. We put her in touch with Arts Richmond. I know that Councillor Baker was involved in that as well, in his remit as with business. So yeah, do you want to say anything, Richard?
Yes, I did. Thanks, Jim. Yes, the intrinsic issue about that is that we don't always own these properties, and landlords aren't always happy to see them go out. They'd perhaps sometimes rather see them sitting there empty, which is unfortunate. And equally, artists aren't always looking to spend money on them as studios. They're looking for somewhere which is quite cheap. But if you can get something with some support through the Richmond Art Council and so on, where I think they've worked together on certain properties, and then I think it's very effective in terms of opening it up, bringing a bit of life to one part of the high street.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Tamara Cave, you have a question. Over to you, Tamara. Tamara, you have your question. Could we ask for Tamara's question, please?
Yes, hi. It's I've sort of written in the chat. It's about the big congestion issues that we have through Hampton Hill and beyond as a result of, well, I think traffic calming, which is a joke because it's not aiding traffic, it's causing traffic. But the other knock-on effect is caused by Bushy Park closure. That's having a big knock-on effect all over the place and causing people to have to drive further in their cars. And I really don't understand how this is environmentally friendly, but I guess it's not a council issue, it's a Royal Parks issue, but it would be nice if the council supported it because it's an environmental issue.
Thank you. Is that one of the councillors who has an interest in the traffic or what?
I can respond a bit on this one. So yes, the Royal Parks are a charity. They're not under the council's control. They did do a movement strategy thing, which I was one of the first people to talk to them about, and said various things about linking in with the cycle network and so on. And please don't stop us from driving across the park because you'll be shifting congestion into the High Street and Hampton Hill. And obviously they didn't take my view on that one. But what we are doing to hopefully reduce some of those problems is there are various pinch points in and around the High Street where we've taken out a couple of parking spaces, and we're looking at some keep clear signs where there's a couple of other things that cause pinch points along the High Street. And most importantly, we've got Transport for London, who control the traffic lights, have promised to review the Hampton Hill lights this September. And we think the rephasing of those lights should be able to get, or the officers advise us that it should be possible to get more traffic through those lights on there. So hopefully that rephasing will reduce the problem somewhat.
Thank you very much. I think traffic could take the rest of the evening because it is difficult for all of us, but thank you for what you're doing. Helen Page, you have a question on recycling for us in the borough. Helen Page, could we unmute her, please?
Yeah, sorry, it just takes a few seconds for us to find
apologise,
for them to unmute themselves.
Thank you. Okay,
So,
Helen, are you with us?
I'm Tony Page. So we're in Hampton Wick. I think that it might be a similar issue for the people in Teddington and Hampton Hill, that we have to drive to Townmead, which is currently shut anyway because of a fire. But Townmead is a long way and Kingston Dump is very close. And the borough council seem unable to talk to one another and make a sensible reciprocal arrangement. We've raised this before. Nothing's happened. We've been told it's too difficult, but we're being asked to think big here. So let's do a big thing and actually go to our nearest recycling centre.
So if it's Hampton Wick, shall I take that to start with? And,
yes, please.
Absolutely, it's a frustration, and it's something that is felt certainly by Hampton Wick residents and also Hampton residents. You're right; it's been an issue for a long time. The previous Tory administration tried. We've tried. We have had some discussions with Kingston Council. it's a real challenge because there's no automatic reciprocal rights as there are with Spaceway, for example, in Feltham. So you can go and use Spaceway in Feltham, which is in another borough, but Kingston is a separate waste authority, and the challenge is trying to realistically giving Kingston Council the incentive to allow Richmond residents to use their recycling tip, because all the Kingston residents equally are having to queue to use their tip already, and clearly there's also financial issues to be sorted out if we were to try and use their tip. We've tried absolutely to make the environmental argument about the fact that it's not only inconvenient, we've got people having to drive a long way to Townmead relative to the Kingston tip. So absolutely trying to make that argument. Martin might be close to whether there's any prospects of success.
Well, the problem
knocking
is
on the door, but it's tricky.
The problem is when the GLC or the GLA was set up, waste should have been dealt with London-wide, and it hasn't been dealt with London-wide, so we have these groupings of boroughs. And there is absolutely no advantage for Kingston making any arrangement with us, because there's nobody in Kingston would want to drive to Kew. So the only possibility is some financial arrangement. And at the moment, Kingston they have their own problems in managing their waste depot, and they just don't want to talk about it at the moment. They don't want more traffic passing through the borough. And I'm afraid I think we've exhausted the possibilities for the moment. The answer is, as I've said previously, is of course it's a London-wide thing. It shouldn't be divided up in this way, but that's what the legislation was, and most boroughs seem to want to keep it that way.
I think we'll keep knocking on the door because I understand there's some works needed at the Kingston tip. So they've got access problems already as it is, and they need to do some works there. Maybe once they've managed to complete those works, we'll go back again and keep knocking on the door.
Maybe we need a second Townsmead in another part of the borough. If we're going to think big, we find another recycling centre.
Well, you'd be amazed. The people who've had flats built next to Townmead are now trying to close it down because they don't know the idea of having a recycling depot next to them. And I think finding another site in the borough it would be so unpopular and so difficult. It's probably not really going to happen.
Well, Feltham Spaceways, we do have reciprocal access to there, and for people in the Hampton Hill area, the only problem that I've had people complain to me about is that there is a step or two involved at Feltham Spaceways, and there was the Townmead before the fire was relatively step-free access on there. But if that isn't your concern, then Feltham Spaceways is probably closer than Townmead, particularly for people in Hampton Hill.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, you've asked a slightly different question about disinfection solutions. It's maybe tangentially linked, but
no, I know.
Rebecca, that would be lovely.
Hi there. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to basically put a shout out there to say that I'm working for a local business and we're supplying UVC disinfection solutions in Hampton Hill. And I don't know if I could be of any help to local businesses or council offices, gyms, the schools. We've got robots are probably not necessary, but we've got lights that can change between LED and UVC uses. They're hybrids. It's like modern technology, but nobody seems to know about it. Nobody seems to be willing to look into it or test it or try it. And I'm just wanting to say that I'm here. And if anybody is interested in disinfection solutions for local businesses, then please do give me a shout. I'll put a message in the chat and I'll give you my...
Can you put your details in the chat?
I will, and please do. Honestly, I'm here to help, and not just to sell, I'm here to help, because that's what we're all about. We're looking out for each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. John Self, you've got a question, I think, about those of us who try and rush through the borough instead of acknowledging it's residential. John Self, could you put your question, please?
It's not a question. Yeah, hello. We live in Fulwell, in a small community area, Clonmel Road, Winchton Road, Wilcox Road. And we have an awful lot of cars who just drive through, I think, really to avoid the traffic lights at South Cross Road. And I do wonder what the future is of the low traffic neighbourhoods and others that came in with the pandemic, and I accept that a lot of those were done without proper consultation and caused problems. But I do think there are opportunities where we could really look at some of those issues. I'd like to know how to take that forward.
Councillor Saunders, did you?
Yeah, can I respond to that?
Thank you.
Just a man after my own heart here. I think I live in Winchington Road, and I think one of the changes that I've noticed is actually since Lidl appeared, which has lots of advantages, of course, especially during COVID. The traffic down Clonmel and Winchington has increased substantially as expected. What you need to do if you want to look at low traffic neighbourhood, and obviously the CPZ will also have hopefully a beneficial effect when that comes in round our way, is actually to raise a petition. If you want to email me, just maybe email me on my council email, and we maybe can have a chat and get that going somehow.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Moose, you've got a question about monitoring shop fronts and keeping us all smart. Would you like to put your question, please?
Hold on, I'm just unmuting myself.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
like I said, I'm not really Moose. I didn't realise it was going to be translated into this forum. It's usually for my friends. But yeah, I mean, I think what was most shocking and most depressing almost was over COVID, you know, a lot of the shops, even people like Coat, you know, they didn't make the most of the fact that, you know, they were empty. It actually made it look really depressing. And chairs on tables, you know, brown curtains, God knows what else is. And it really didn't help the whole, you know, the morale of the local people, I don't think, certainly myself. And I do think that, as I've mentioned in our group, you know, next to Red Peppers in Teddington High Street, there's this property that has had this horrible ginger brown painted frontage for as long as I've lived here, 16 years. And, you know, if there are redundant spaces or whatever, surely it's the duty of the landlords, or should be, to you know, put decals or paint these properties so that it doesn't degrade the level of the look and feel of our high street, because it only takes a few of those to actually make a really horrible feeling within the high street, regardless of what other people are doing. And they should be responsible. They should be made responsible to keep the upkeep of their properties to a standard that keeps the morale and aesthetic look of the high street. You know,
you've mentioned Teddington. I wonder whether one of the Teddington councillors might like to talk, because I'm sure you'll have looked at some of the issues. They're very difficult, but perhaps one of the Teddington councillors might like to comment.
Well, if I can comment on Red Peppers, the problem is that they have permission to extend the restaurant into that area, which is actually full of furniture. They do use it for various strange purposes. We did persuade them, I think it was 3 years ago, to repaint. But now, unfortunately, Red Peppers is a different colour from the property next door to it. But the only power the council has over private property like that is if it becomes so horrible to look at that it becomes an eyesore. And that's why it got repainted a few years ago, because we made a fuss. But beyond that, we don't have the power to interfere with.
But, you know, that ginger brown or burgundy has always been the colour in 16 years that I've lived here.
Well, that's right, but that's their choice. We can't tell people what colour to paint their shops.
That's very kind. It's difficult, isn't it? Yeah. We're getting nearer to 8 o'clock. Perhaps we could fit one more in, which is this notion about from Margaret Beasley, where she has a question about us using our own cups rather than disposable ones and being a little more environmentally aware. Margaret, would you like to put your question, please?
Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
There are so many coffee shops and people enjoying them, and I'm concerned about the amount of plastic in the disposable cups. And when I go to places, I take my own cup in my bag, but that's when I'm traveling, not in Teddington. In Teddington, I don't very often personally have a coffee. I used to go to the organic one that did use china cups. So would people consider I don't know how the shops, how it would work for the big chains, etc. But I think most of ours are little.
Well, I think if you it is a problem. I think you're quite right, and it's of concern because there's so many of the darn things. But if you actually have a coffee in the place, then I think you can use the china cups, obviously. Now, that wasn't necessarily the case during certain times during the pandemic, where I think some of them did change, and although you might be sitting there, it was given to you in the plastic cups. But you're right that it's the takeaway ones where
I've noticed people outside with plastic cups.
Yeah, they're the ones that go out walking along the street, the darn things. And yes, it would be nice if people could take their own cups and cut down a little bit on that. But people haven't got around to thinking that through yet.
That's very kind. Thank you very much. It's now just gone 8 o'clock, and sadly, we must close this conversation. Firstly, I'd like to say a big thank you to all the residents who've given up their time this evening to join us. It's much appreciated. If your comment or question wasn't included, may I apologise, but can I assure you that the council officers are taking all of the 36 extra messages which are showing up on my chat room, and that you will be responded to, and these comments will form part of the report on this evening's meeting. Thank you then also to Mr. Paul Clement for stimulating and encouraging us to think imaginatively, think big about how our high streets can support and improve our community life. I'd like to thank also our councillors for being with us, and thank you, councillors, for the work you do locally. You're much appreciated, and it's clear from what we've heard today how much time you're putting in on our behalf. Thank you. And finally, to the hidden group, thank you to the many council officers who've worked behind the scenes to facilitate, to record and arrange these borough-wide conversations and the complexities of the presentations we've had this evening. Can I wish you all a good evening? And I look forward to all of us working together in our local neighbourhoods for the benefit of every family, every individual, so we can have a better community for the future. Thank you again very much. I now declare this conversation closed.
Thank you, John, for sharing us.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for your sharing.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.
Thank you.